All right. Hello everybody. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. This is Park Launch's next panel session, and today we will talk about Kubernetes. So, primarily give you an introduction to our panelists here. First of all, myself, my name is Babar, and I'm a part of Hybrid Computing. And joining me today is our managing partner, Ajmal Mahmood, as well. He's here somewhere. So, waving the hand for a little bit. All right, thanks for joining. And primarily, I've been involved with the design and implementation of enterprise applications for 20 years in North America. I've done some work in Europe and Middle East, and I have served with a lot of organizations, just like Oracle, General Motors, Montreal, Pfizer, name it, and some of the major organizations. And Ajmal Mahmood here, he's also a managing partner here at Hyperlink Computing. He's joining us today. He's also our senior architect. He's actually the architect here with us. He's also been involved with designing, architecting, and building some of the world's most complex IT applications and solutions for last actually a little over 25 years now. And he has been involved with the Walmarts and the Oracle and AutoZone and PayPal's of the world. So he brings in some extensive experience when it comes to enterprise applications and cloud computing and application development on performance computing architectures. So and as Hyperlink Computing, we are your Kubernetes experts. So when we look at our agenda today, so what we are looking at, we will be talking about primarily Kubernetes. We will cover the key and some of the vital information about Kubernetes, its strategic advantages that it provides you as an organization who deploys that Kubernetes, some common use cases. Towards the end, we will primarily look at how Hyperlink Computing is planning to incentivize IT individuals in Pakistan to become Kubernetes professionals. And towards the end, we will go Q&A session. So please feel free to ask all the questions you have when we get there, and we will provide ample time when it comes for Q&A. So before we jump into Kubernetes, what I thought it would be a good idea to see what is the challenge in the market today that we have that Kubernetes is trying to resolve. So if some of you may remember our first expert panel that we had at Park Launch, that was hosted by Zuhaib Khan Bhai, and he did an awesome job in explaining us what microservices were and how they worked. And that brings a lot of information that we get from him for microservices. So some of the challenges that are associated with deployment of microservices, we will kind of look at some of those, and then we will kind of see how Kubernetes basically meets those challenges. So if we remember, we saw that microservices are primary containers, and containers are nothing but self-contained, fully contained containers that have all the code, all the operating system related items, libraries, and within themselves that are needed by a microservice. So when you have a microservice available for your application, and let's say you are deploying a large application, you have a large e-commerce application, and you have millions of users potentially that are coming to your website, then what you will do, you will have an architecture where you will do automatically scaling the microservices, which will be basically launching the more than one instances of the same microservice to meet that need. And then because microservice is basically a very small unit of the application, and to complete the application, you will have a lot of other microservices that are running within containers. So potentially you can have thousands of containers running to support your solution and support all the traffic that application, be it e-commerce or some other web or some other application that you have within your enterprise. So when that happens, then as the organization, What happens if some of them crash and they die, and nobody's watching them because there's no mechanism for you to watch? Then what if there are, how do you monitor how many micro instances of same microservice is launched within containers? So all of that could become a major challenge, managing those, making sure that they are running. You would have to have manual people hired within your organization who are basically sitting there and monitoring those and managing and making sure that if something some microservices fail, then launch them manually. So that's one challenge that we have in front of us when we talk about microservices. Another microservices challenge is that when, let's say, because microservices run in containers, of course, run in the container runtimes. Docker runtime is an example of one of the container runtimes that we have in the market. So let's say if you are using Docker runtime as your to deploy your applications, um, one of the major issues is that multiple runtimes running on different machines. One runtime cannot communicate with the other. So let's say if you have your containers running on different runtimes, they cannot communicate with each other. So let's say if you need to deploy another component of your application, what you would have to do, you will have to bring down your runtime, which is basically, we kind of call it vertical scaling, where you have to, make sure first that your machine that is hosting your runtime has enough CPU, enough power, enough, for you to run, and you will have to bring it down and then deploy another container within that runtime. So that downtime will cost you a lot of time, a lot of money. And then of course if you have multiple runtimes running, of course you have a load that disperses all the requests that are coming in from different users. But people, your users or your applications, that could be your users too, they are sending you requests that could be of different nature. So one user's request could be served within a millisecond, and other users' requests could be served on maybe in a longer time, or if for some of us who are familiar with databases, maybe you have queries that come fast and queries. So how do you handle that? Let's say if your one runtime is busy because your load balancer is low. I heard, last couple of minutes when, Ajmal was kind of trying to explain, what the vertical, scaling basically means, because, you have human involvement that becomes very expensive as well. So that's also, one of the challenges of microservices. If you don't have a system that can manage all these containers. So there is an yeah. So another challenge of microservices is faced when we look at microservices when they are deployed on VM cloud. So in this scenario, this little diagram that we have in front of you, this may look a bit intimidating or very busy, but if you notice that on each box there is kind of an identifier that says VM1 and 2 and VM7 and 10 and then VM18 and 20. So what we are trying to show here is that you have an application, which is basically you have all the microservices running at a VM level. So each time you have a microservice running, you basically launch a VM, and then when you launch a VM, basically what you are doing is the virtual machine itself is a copy of your whole operating system. So if in this example, for example, we have 20 VMs running, you are basically running 20 copies of your operating system on your machines. So basically, that takes a lot of resources. So it'll take your CPU time to launch and run your operating system. It will take your memory. It will take your hard disk space to host all those VMs. So that's a lot of resources that you're wasting when you run microservices on a VM cloud, which is not, of course, very efficient, because you're repeating the footprint of all the VMs. And on top of that, when you're running on a VM cloud, then of course what you're doing is you don't know where your VMs are being launched. For example, on AWS, if you have EC2 EC2 instances that you're launching, you never know which machine they're running. So what happens is that, these cloud providers usually they have a tendency of oversubscribing as well to the resources. So let's say if they have, machines that can, handle 10 VMs, they'll sell it to the customers, times three to that. So that would be 30 different VMs but they are hoping that only 10 people will run it at a time. So that also takes away the resources uh, from you when you have your microservices running on a VM cloud. So that's another challenge for you. So, when we have all these challenges, basically what happens, that's where basically Kubernetes comes
Okay.
to rescue for you.
If Babar, if I can interject for a minute,
Sure.
the pattern you showed is a very successful pattern, and about 90% of like microservice architecture application really use that pattern. So it's not like in any way like you can say it's a bad pattern, but like and this is and this picture is really an e-commerce working e-commerce site where you have like like maybe like 6 or 7 microservices working together to create a busy e-commerce site, and then you can scale like on each of the service. The 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 what Kubernetes bring in this picture is much better efficiency, better like and with each efficiency factor it reduces cost. So that is what like Kubernetes bring in this picture, especially. Otherwise, like this is the current pattern where most of the microservices are most of the applications are getting deployed.
Okay. All right. Yep. Thank you so much, Ajmal, here for this. So, now that we have seen the challenges, basically this is where, the Kubernetes comes in to the rescue. Um, primarily at a very high level, basically Kubernetes is an open source container orchestration system. So, you guys know what an orchestra is. So, you have microservices all over the place, but now you have a conductor, which basically takes control of all those microservices and tells them what to do and where to sit and what to play. All right. So we have, Kubernetes originally developed by Google, and it was basically, open sourced out for the community to the world, and now it's being managed by the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, CNCF. And this basically, as of now, is one of the fastest growing open source project in the world. Uh, so when we say something is, fastest growing, that means basically the adoption for that technology is at the peak at this moment out of all other open source projects that are there. Now we will kind of look at some of the key features and benefits of Kubernetes. And Ajmal, thank you so much for your feedback. Please do jump in as you see fit. So so that we can provide the best to our audience today.
Sure, thank
So
you.
first of all, when we look at this Kubernetes, the very first thing that you have is the service reliability. So we saw that you had microservices initially that were being launched, and you have all these thousands of potential microservices, that containers that are running, but there is no way for you to manage them. But what you have now is the service reliability. So how Kubernetes does that is, the way you communicate with Kubernetes is through a declarative definition of resources within the Kubernetes. You tell what a microservice will look like, what function it will run, how much memory it will take, how many instances you want to launch for that particular service, and all the related information that you will provide. And then what Kubernetes will do, it will ensure that all the microservices that are running within Kubernetes are always running and in a desired state. So, if you say you want to, run a microservice and you want to run 25 instances of it, and one happens to, die for whatever reason, Kubernetes will automatically launch another, instance of it without you ever worrying about that. So that's the service reliability that Kubernetes brings to table. On top of that, Kubernetes, of course, is a cloud native application. So which basically means you can deploy your applications basically on any Kubernetes service provider or any cloud that provides you with that service. So you're basically, you're not tied with the, one service provider or one type of, atmosphere, environment or cloud service. So it's that's the benefit or the magic of the cloud native applications. So and also when you are working with the public cloud providers, what happens is, let's say if you need a load balancer for your application, you go to AWS and you deploy a load balancer within your environment, and the minute you start it, the meter starts because AWS has your credit card number, so that they start charging. That's just one example. So now you can imagine within your environment, you can have so many other services that you may need, and these service providers basically, charge you for that, and those services are not included most of the time within the service. So you end up paying a lot of money. But what happens with Kubernetes is all of these ancillary services are included, which is software defined networks and storage, resource utilization policies, roles and permissions, and ingress load balancing is one of the example, and scaling, of course, and all of that. So all of this functionality is included within the Kubernetes application. Um, if we go a little further, we look at this, one of the kind of another environment, kind of a hypothetical application that you may have in your organization. So basically, the rich features that are here within the Kubernetes, it's amazing how it works. So basically, let's say if in your environment you have an e-commerce application where you have potentially millions of users coming in minutes and seconds or hours, for Walmart or other big e-commerce applications. Then your biggest challenge is on how to serve those clients in a timely manner, because time is money, and you cannot afford to have those people wait for the requests or searches that they are doing. So the way Kubernetes helps you with that is, so for example, in this architecture, I would like to bring your attention to, some of these, these three different areas where we have, yellow highlighted areas. So let's say when you have millions of people coming into your application, you want to make sure that their digital certificates and authentication and validation is done at super, fast speed, and that authentication doesn't take long. So what we have here is we have the advanced encryption standard that is your AES NI device that you put, and what Kubernetes does is you identify that as an AES node, and that's the only thing you do. And then let's say for example, within your solution, you have to deploy some machine learning models for your recommendation engine. So what you do is, of course, for machine learning, you can't really use your standard CPUs. You go ahead and employ the cheap machines that have GPUs, which is the graphical processing units that work the best with the machine learning models. So you will have machines that have GPUs in them. So then you will go ahead and label them as GPUs. And then of course you have something else, which is when the user is searching for something, you need to have a very strong search index in your organization, which requires NVMe storage. So you will deploy those. Now you have deployed these three very specialized hardware solutions that are there. But how do you change your application so that it uses these three specialized hardware? That would be a very complex operation within the organization. But the way Kubernetes works is you don't have to change the code of your application. So the only thing you do is you deploy these, and then you basically provide something that's called the label. You label them that this is the use of this AES, and this is the use of GPU or NVMe. And then all the services that you deploy, if you have a microservice that takes care of authentication, Kubernetes will automatically deploy that service on this machine instead of just going into any random machine. If you have a super microservice that basically runs your machine learning model, then um, Kubernetes will automatically deploy that on the machine that is built on GPUs. So now you see that the intelligence that Kubernetes has, without you ever changing, even one line of code within your application, you were able to employ and deploy these specialized hardware within your environment,
So if
and that
so if I can, sorry, Babar, if I can
sure,
just quickly interject that,
absolutely.
like, this is what Babar is really describing is an awesome example of like how does like kind of smart Kubernetes scheduler work. um like Kubernetes scheduler has to manage all the containers and make sure schedule them on most appropriate runtime. But then, like if the machine has like more memory, it like and it knows like what is the container footprint, it might put more containers or more parts on that particular machine. But on another one which has like smaller footprint, it will like a smaller memory, it will get like lesser containers. Beyond that, what Babar has really presented is that like we are giving some hints to make the Kubernetes scheduler more smarter. So in this solution, like we have some specialized hardware, and we labeled these hardware nodes for the Kubernetes scheduler. So it really will try to like make sure that like the service micro authentications microservice, it will get deployed on nodes which have a label called AES node, because they might have like some kind of hardware access assisted acceleration for encoding, de-encoding, or de-encrypting the token, AES token. And if Kubernetes cannot find a lot of these nodes, like it might deploy on other node also, but it will give the preference to wherever like you define the affinity. And so essentially, you have taken that smartness out of application and made it more declarative. And now the admins, Kubernetes admin, can define the application architecture and topology.
Thank you. That was awesome. Thank you, Ajmal. So these were some of the very high level, features, that we have kind of described here in like, our 5 or 7 slides that I have reviewed so far with you guys. And as Ajmal pointed out, one of the things that he mentioned is the scheduler. And similarly, Kubernetes have hundreds of other features that we haven't even touched upon, and it will need hours and hours and even days of training to kind of go through all of those features and benefits that you can get from Kubernetes. But that's those are just some of those that we have covered. So now that we have looked at Kubernetes in terms of as a solution, what is going on? What is going on around Kubernetes? Um, so Kubernetes is basically what we're trying to say here. It's not alone. Kubernetes has a huge ecosystem. So if you go to CNCF website, probably you have more than 911 items that are, for whatever reason, I don't know why I picked 911. I said 910 products and services available for you to build your solution. It has a very rich landscape. And some of the areas that I basically put on this slide is storage related, networks related, the databases related. So you could have, a need to run memcache. So you would use Redis as the database, or if you have an RDS, probably you will use, Cassandra or some other databases, or MySQL, or if you have NoSQL database requirements, then you will need some other type of database. So within the database itself, you have more than probably maybe 20 or 30 options, streaming the same way, or scheduling and container runtime. So Docker is just one container runtime that we have touched in our introduction here. But I think Container D or Creo is are some of the other options that are also available. And then, last but not the least, monitoring is there, and it's a very rich ecosystem that is available for you as an organization to deploy Kubernetes to fulfill all of your needs that any complex system can ever ask for potentially. So it's all there. So it's really really rich environment that you can kind of traverse and learn more. Um, so as we come towards the end of our discussion here, I just wanted to quickly kind of see what are the opportunity for our Park Launch community that is present here, and other members of the community that are not present here. So as a business, basically what happens is that for you, moving your microservices to Kubernetes will result in huge cost savings, because your compute resources are optimized. And of course, high plains computing, HPC, can help you achieve this. As an individual, of course, because we saw that Kubernetes is one of the most adapted and successful open source project ever. So what does that mean for you as an individual is that if you have Kubernetes skill, which is a highly sought after skill, then you can market yourself at in a very comfortable state. You have more opportunity for yourself. So here, high plane computing again helps you, and then we can train you Kubernetes, and actually in the gratitude and letting us speak here today, and presenting this little bit of knowledge about Kubernetes, what we are doing. We have an exclusive offer for Park Launch community, and I'm really happy to actually introduce this, and to that we will be conducting an instructor-led Kubernetes training with Park Launch, and we will be coordinating this effort with Park Launch admin. And we don't have a date yet, but we will be announcing that soon. Basically, the goal of that training is to prepare you for a certified Kubernetes administrator exam. As some of you may know, it's a very complex exam. It's an exam where there is a person basically sitting and watching you while you solve all the problems on maybe 4 or 5 Kubernetes cluster that they give you. So it's a very complex exam, and we have a total capable team here at High Plains Computing to train you on that. And now, of course, one more offer that we have, and this is a special offer by Ajmal Mahmood here, of course, High Plains Computing again, that if we train you and then you happen to pass, and you put the time and effort to pass that exam, we will reimburse you for the exam fee, which is $300. So you train with us, and then you go ahead and pass the exam, and then we reimburse you for that fee. And by the way, the low cost for the instructor-led training, the cost for this training, through Park Launch platform, it's only $50 US, and which is basically a very nominal fee as compared to some of the other instructor-led trainings that you have seen um, out there. And you can never beat the $300 reimbursement that you're going to be getting if you pass. And then, of course, as a Kubernetes certified solution provider, we feel that we have this responsibility of helping our community professionals and IT service providers to basically take advantage of this new technology that is actually emerging. And I think this is the right time to take advantage of this. So please feel free to reach out to us if you have any question about our offers or our expertise in our company. And you can reach out to admins to get our information, or you can reach out to us through our website. So now what I'll
If
do,
I
I'll
can
just
add, Babur sir, if you can just for a minute, if I can add a couple of things, if
sure,
you
sure.
move back a little bit, just very quickly. One of the things as a business, like when we say the cost saving, there are like really two factors which Kubernetes help in saving costs. One of them is like very native to containers. Containers are very lightweight, and as compared to virtual machines where like multiple copies of OS get again loaded and loaded and loaded and waste huge memory. And then they also virtualize the CPU resources, and CPU running under virtual machines, you get really there's a tax of some virtualization code, which essentially slows down your application. In containers, you are really running at a native speed. So in general, the cost saving just because of containerization is like 40% as compared to virtual machines. On top of that, uh, where like really big buck saving comes in, that all these like services which you run on Kubernetes, most of them, they public cloud providers, they provide as a managed services like databases and log collection and monitoring and alerts, and all these managed services, they cost a lot of them. You kind of pay for them, and that adds up very very quickly. And on Kubernetes, you have an option to consume these managed services if you don't have really all the skills to self manage it, or you can natively self manage all of them. Pretty much every service which a big public cloud provider like Microsoft Azure or Google or AWS provides, you can self run it in Kubernetes and so that's number one. And the second thing I wanted to is yeah, Bobber mentioned the exam is very difficult. It's indeed not very difficult. A good the Unix admin after this training should be able to do that. It's just an open book exam, and where you you get numbers based on a task accomplished rather than memorization or answering questions. That's it, Baba.
All right,
Okay,
great. Thank you.
Babar, we have a question posted by Sayed Farhan Shakil, and he asked, where is Kubernetes most frequently used these days?
All right, I'll leave it with you, Ajmal.
Oh, okay. So, so some of the large Kubernetes applications, some of the large current deployments I've seen is one of the one I have seen one uh, e-commerce search engine. E-commerce search engines historically have been monolithic applications like Endeka, and there's a lot of them, and they need so much functionality that's pretty much everyone given up, because you keep on adding the same more and more functionality every year to the same application. Essentially that application gets so much bloated that it cannot be really maintained. So Kubernetes really lets you take that functionality of search engine, like it's right. Like for example, like most search engines have ranking rules, or may have thesaurus and or natural language processing, or may inject some recommended and suggested product based on the customer who is searching. All these little functionalities can be a microservice, and you pack them as a Kubernetes application or microservices, and provide an e-commerce search engine to big companies. And I have seen a lot of e-commerce search engines are really Kubernetes applications.
Yeah, I would like to add few popular companies, very well known all over the world, such as Netflix. The Netflix platform is running on Kubernetes, as well as lately the whole world came to know about Shopify, how their business increased during the COVID, how their technology expert came out and they mentioned it is their microservices architecture running on Kubernetes that made it a lot easier for them to scale. So Shopify, Netflix, and there are a lot of many other organizations, a lot of startups that are on a scale are also deciding to go on Kubernetes as their orchestration engine for containerized application.
And also, like the big public clouds, they run Kubernetes for pretty much most of their managed services. Like what you think you're getting a Lambda might be a Kubernetes like a running pod. It will like it will just accept your code and run as a Lambda, but behind the scene it might be a Kubernetes.
Yeah. There is another question posted by Nextgen. What is your opinion on the percentage of applications which are moving on cloud slash Docker based technology around the globe? Where Pakistan is standing uh, is the subject. Dr. Saab, before you go ahead, I just wanted to add one piece in the answer. Um, Actually, Dr. Ajmal will answer this. I just wanted to add one thing here. In 2020, the most amount of money invested in the Kubernetes-based product developers acquisition in Kubernetes areas, such as IBM bought Red Hat only because of OpenShift. OpenShift is nothing under the hood, it's all Kubernetes. And IBM has even decided to go in full-fledged as a cloud company, making their flagship product OpenShift, which is basically under the hood is Kubernetes. That was a $37 billion acquisition from IBM. Plus, Cisco has spent almost $4 billion in buying 6 or 7 companies who develop Kubernetes-based softwares. So altogether, there is a big race going on. Companies are buying startups that are developing Kubernetes-based project. Another come to my mind is Weavework. WeWork hasn't been acquired, but Amazon has invested almost $40 million in last few months in WeWork with Google Ventures as well as another organization. I'm unable to recall the name. So this is how you can see how Kubernetes volume business wise is increasing. We can see how the investment, no investor will ever invest in anything, in any product which they don't see the value. So now, Dr. Saab, can you further elaborate
Oh, okay.
pure technology wide,
Thanks,
like,
thanks,
sure.
thanks. So this is like you kind of showed the potential, and I will like kind of be very honest and frank with you. I worked for like kind of for last 3 years. I worked for 3 large e-commerce companies, which essentially like kind of which get like kind of millions of user per day traffic on their site, and like this like really sell billions of worth of merchandise every year. And unfortunately, like there's a lot of potential and it's growing, but currently like their 1 to 3% of computing is really like our business related computing is on Kubernetes, um, which like if you look at it from that perspective, it doesn't look very promising. But then you have like a lot of potential to grow. So essentially, like because it's an emerging technology, like so IT adoption is like really not that great right now. But I am hoping it's gonna get like in next decade, like tremendously improved.
Yeah. And the question, the poster also posted, he asked particularly about Pakistan. So I think at this moment, Pakistani organization who is seeing a growth in their business and their customer base. At this moment, it would be much better if Pakistani organization prefer to implement Kubernetes on premise or try to pick a micro cloud based architecture that high plane computing has expertise to implement, and we will be able to provide more information if information is needed. So you can reach Babar or Dr. Ajmal.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah. So we have another question, I think, from Nextgen.
Correct. One more
So
question from Nextgen is, does the training only covers Kubernetes configuration, usage, security configuration, or security assessment of this platform is taught in this training? Can I answer this question? I will
you.
give you
Sure,
the
sure,
opportunity.
go ahead. Go ahead.
So I wanna talk about security area. As you as you can imagine, whenever we are implementing any solution, whether it's microservices based or if it is not, security itself is a completely different domain. So when we implement Kubernetes and obviously we are dividing a monolithic application into component which are individual, we call them microservice. Each microservice has its own piece of software running in it, and it may be a database, it could be a front end or a middleware application server connecting to services, and it has many other endpoints. So in this training will be a complete Kubernetes system certified administrator training, which they call it CKA. Then there is another area of Kubernetes, which is certified Kubernetes security specialist, which is not covered in this training, but 80% of the content of both certification is same. One thing. Second thing is, when we are talking about security in the microservices architecture, then it is basically, it's not a Kubernetes security, but it's a whole landscape security in which we float the term called DevSecOps. In DevSecOps, microservices architecture security needed to be addressed. And within that domain, Kubernetes is one piece of the puzzle. And then containers and the runtime and the various other component built. So hitting the security itself is a critical area, or I would say domain, which we would like to address separately, but we cannot ignore it completely at all.
I
Dr.
can,
Shah,
if I can like kind of really
yes,
summarize, like
please.
90% of security use cases would be covered. Like kind of like when you define which microservice need to talk to which one, uh, and what like kind of credentials or authentication, a level of like kind of permissions, one microservice have for another, or like kind of what are the limits like kind of containers can do and what they can't, pretty much everything, because CK exam also like covers heavily on security. So we can say that 90% of the security scenarios really will get covered.
Yes.
okay. So we have another
And
question from Adil Muzaffar.
Adil, maybe this question also link with app modernization, which should be the prerequisite for app host environment. I think you are right, Adil. This is a step towards the modern application architecture.
No, actually, my question was,
Yeah.
if you go ahead before that comment, what are the parameters which you think make the application candidate to be deployed on Cube environment? I think this is the most important question. Why you are, I mean, selecting
Okay.
Kubernetes?
Why in first place that you think your application would be a candidate for this new modern architecture. Dr. Saab, would you please?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. We kind of like when there's a context to this course, this session, which was like kind of really follow up of like kind of like if you have developed microservices, which got like kind of addressed in one of the previous park line sessions, and so we thought like kind of let's leverage that conversation and bring it ahead, and like kind of that you have already decided that you are going the microservices architecture. So our conversation in this slide decks was really that you have already decided. Now we are realizing it. How do you like kind of realize that? If you have already a microservice architecture, really Kubernetes is the best and only platform. There actually I wouldn't say the only platform. There's an alternate. You can also use Docker Swarm. Uh, but like in terms of like kind of adoption, Docker Swarm versus Kubernetes is like kind of really widely accepted. It's an open source and like kind of it has a lot of community push behind it. So if the question is really about that if you have already decided that like kind of my application is microservices, is Kubernetes the most suitable? I would say yes, because it is the best orchestration platform other than like other available platforms are like realizing that microservice architecture on virtual machines, which we already answered that like if you realize your microservice architecture on virtual machine, it's very inefficient and very like like it costs a lot.
Uh, So if if I'm gonna just jump in for a little bit, I'm not sure when I was having network issues at my end. I stepped away for a second, and maybe we haven't had a chance to introduce Salman here. Salman Usmani here. He's part of our High Plains computing team. He's also a veteran of IT for over 20 years. And actually have deployed, designed, and architected many of the complex, applications worldwide. And he's also Kubernetes certified administrator himself. He's also a master of AWS and Azure, and also a certified associate, I think, with AWS and architect. So thank you for helping us, Salman. So I just wanted to make sure that I introduce you properly to everyone here on the platform.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Just one follow up is that the did we really answer the question or
For Adil,
for Adil, or can we ask?
Yes, I think, but still, I need to understand what would be the size of the application. What you think this size of application should be the candidate to be deployed in Kubernetes, or maybe the same environment.
Oh, okay, so yeah, application suitability. It would take a like little bit more time to explain like and I have worked in this area, but definitely if I can get like your contact, I can email that like because there is a certain criteria or certain like value like are certain complexity in application before like you like try to uh, bring an application to Kubernetes, because there are some like for small applications there are alternatives like a non Kubernetes alternative which are very effective also. So like I would like if you like if you get me like some contact information, I can definitely share my thoughts on what really application qualifies for moving to Kubernetes.
yeah.
Great. We get the email ID of
Sure, sir. Thank you.
Adil
I've just
Muzaffar.
yes, I've just sent the IM. I would love to connect with you in this regard. Thank you, sir.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, great. And I think the same I would repeat for everyone on our platform here today. is to post your email address on this chat. But if we do it after, feel free to reach out to us through Park Launch platform, or just go to highplanes.io and just send us an email and a question, and then we'll get back to you. And I think we can even just create a group where we can actually help and assist people every now and then when there is a question. And also, I think, if you don't mind me, before I go to the next question or suggestion, I think is that Ajmal had a very good idea that moving forward in the future, apart from the training, maybe we can, with the Park Launch administrators' permission, we may try to have another expert panel session where we will kind of go through a real life scenario of how a complex or maybe a simple application. I think I'll let Dr. Ajmal choose that. How to kind of implement that application on Kubernetes, and dive deep into that, implementation and how it will work.
Oh,
And I
okay.
think, yeah.
And there's some other questions also. If
Yeah.
I don't know whether we can ask Ali if we have time or we are already.
Oh, okay. So, yeah. Fahad, Ali, do you think that we have a couple of more minutes, or
Yeah,
we have a
absolutely.
hard stop?
Yeah. No, I think we can take some more questions.
Okay, so I'll look at this. The Nextgen here, actually, there is a suggestion for Nextgen is for future webinar. I think so. If possible, arrange a practical session. This will help in building interest and knowledge. Awesome suggestion, Nextgen. I wish I knew. I think that.
Yeah, it's a really good suggestion, and Kubernetes is tailor made for that. Like really because like microservices are so easy to scale, we can demonstrate some of the complex or even simple scenarios like about scalability, fault tolerance, injecting fault, and seeing how microservice recover, or like making sure that let's say some other scenarios that you have multiple tenants within the Kubernetes cluster, or you have like multiple departments like on our QA teams working in it. We can definitely Kubernetes is very hands-on and interactive. We can
Okay,
definitely do that.
we have another question from Vakas Ahmed. The question is, what about the mission critical application? Is Kubernetes recommended, such as bank application? Yes. Let me give you an example of Discover Financials. Discover is one of the major credit card organization in the United States. They few months back, they completely 100% move into they move pretty much all of their mission critical application on Kubernetes. Beside this Kubernetes architecture, microservices architecture is the go-to architecture for the most fintech organization which are in pre-launch or a startup financial organization. One of such company is also popularly known as Stripe. Stripe's mission critical application is also running on Kubernetes. So yes, Kubernetes as a matter of fact, I have experience supporting application in my previous experience as one of a Wall Street bank, and if I had available Kubernetes back then in 2004 2005, I would go on this architecture because disaster recovery and environment, the disaster is basically when your critical application is running on this platform, you always have a parallel available, self-healing. There replica sets available to you. If anything is crashing and any situation that your application is facing because of the memory or because of the network issue or anything, and your Kubernetes is protecting you from going into a disaster mode. So for financial organization, this should be the go-to platform
Yes.
for the modern
Yeah.
application.
Fintechs are the early adopters, really,
Yeah,
and it is really tailored for like like the from get go the platform is really tailored for mission critical applications. Like reliability of operation is like one of the primary goals of the Kubernetes.
fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Awesome session. So we had so far great questions that we had so far, and we have a great presence here. I see. So please feel free to if you want to just unmute yourself and ask a question if you haven't had the chance to ask so far, or feel free to type it away and then we'll answer any questions. And as mentioned earlier, please feel free to visit our website, highplanes.io, and there you can post us messages, and we will get back to you at the earliest. And thank you so much, Dr. Ajmal Saab, joining us for
Okay.
this session
Thanks,
today,
everybody.
and an
Really.
awesome job from the Park Launch administration team. And absolutely, I have no words actually. The amount of work that Park Launch team is doing, and the how accessible they have made all this Pakistani diaspora, that all the people that we are living outside of Pakistan, to the community, to the people in Pakistan, professionals and otherwise, and they are doing an awesome job, and I want to congratulate them for that. And as an organization, we will commit with them to achieve to help them with their mission and work with them. Again, thank you so much, everybody, and thanks, Salman, for helping us with this session today. For you as well, and everybody here, you guys have an awesome day. If you are in Pakistan, here in US or elsewhere, I think you please have a good night, and we're looking forward to talk to you guys in, and at a very high level. We are planning to hopefully have this training that we talked about, Kubernetes certified Kubernetes administrator training after Ramadan sometime, inshallah. So please feel free to give us your feedback by that time, so we will have ample time to come up with the proper date and time and everything else. And for the registration of the training, Park Launch administrators will kind of reach out to all of you, um, and the whole Park Launch community, with the dates and times and how to register and all the logistics about the training. Thank you again. Thank you, Fahad. Thank you, everybody, for joining. And I look forward to join you guys again soon. I'm just psyched. Thank you.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum,
Thank you.
everybody. Really
Walaikum
appreciate
assalam.
that.